It's usually easier to find a sound mixer to talk to you about sound than it is to find a boom operator willing to talk to you about sound, much less talk to you about being a boom operator. And even more rare is to find a veteran, highly skilled boom operator that is willing to talk to you and even answer your questions. That's why I find this video to be extremely important, especially if you're a boom operator or want to be a boom operator. It goes a little bit long, but it's very, very worth it. So joining us today in this episode is Ken Strain, a master boom operator and an educator, just like I am here on SoundSpeeds. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Ken.
My pleasure.
Now, Ken, you're also a career boom operator, and I'm sure that in your years and years of experience, I don't want to say exactly how many, but I'll just put it up on the screen right there. He has been around for a quite long time, and you've developed a lot of skills. And I think you'll agree with me that being a boom operator is a challenge to get the hang of. And to be a good boom operator, you have to amass a big, huge skill set and be basically one of the more skilled people on a film set. Does that
Sure.
sound more or less accurate to you?
Yeah, you have to develop a well-rounded skill set. It's part technical, part physical, and part social. So
Yeah,
you have kind of like a tripod of things that you have to develop is technical, social, and physical. Because your body's involved, your mind is involved, and your mouth is involved in how you talk to people.
absolutely. Could not agree more. So I was going to see if you'd help me come up with a list of 10 things that every boom operator should know.
Right. So we worked on this a little bit, and I came up with five things, just kind of like a precursor, really important things. I'll start with, um, and this is part of my what I teach is how to use your body as efficiently as possible during long takes, because we're in an era of long takes. With digital, now that we're not shooting film anymore, we're shooting digital, and television's very like a format that lends itself to doing long takes and resets. Our bodies are getting destroyed. So really important is learning how to hold the pole as efficiently as possible so you can survive these long takes and arrive into your middle age, and maybe if you want all the way into your retirement without having shoulder issues and other back and shoulder issues. So people don't think about that when they're younger. When they're in their 20s, they're not really thinking about, well, what is my body going to feel like in 15, 20 years from doing this? You don't think about it. But it's not the same world as I came into. So that's what I'm really big on teaching people how to use every part of the body, how you hold the pole right at your hands, from the hands to your shoulders to your elbow to everything, how you brace yourself in the whole stance of holding a pole so that you can survive long takes without any issues, honestly.
And
That's the goal.
I could not agree more. It's a very physical job. And if you start young, you have a tendency of ignoring things like positioning and how to properly stand simply because
Right?
you're so gung ho about trying to get the pole out there. You don't mind stretching out 25 feet for take after take after take and throwing out your body and just
Not
completely
only that,
exhausting yourself.
totally, and not only that, your your examples out there, you've seen what your typical boom operator appears like on picture after picture after picture, and they're all holding the pole over their heads, really long pole, heavy mic. Now they've got transmitters on the end.
Yep.
So it's like
The
now to
wrong
your,
end of the pole, no less.
and it's like this is what you're seeing, and this is like Iwo Jima. It's like, yeah, man, heroes, and that's what you're doing, and I'm just like, yeah, if you do that, I've got way too many friends who are, in their late 40s, early 50s, who are retiring because of shoulder problems that they're now unable to do the job anymore, and their shoulders are messed up, and that's not a cool way to go out.
And
It's
there's a
not.
lot. And there's a lot of people out there that will tell you that the lifespan of a career boom op is mainly about 20 years or so. And if that's the case, there's an issue because that's about the point you start to really get good at it.
Exactly, and like I look at myself and I'm like, shouldn't I be having problems now? But like I said, I've from like pretty early on, I kind of focused on efficiency and what is the easiest way to do this job, and that's how I hold the pole in all situations became like my like efficiency standard of how to do it without working too hard.
And
And it makes you better
it does.
because not working so hard. If you're not struggling to hold the pole for long takes, if you're just doing like I did my last movie on an 816,
Yeah.
okay? So it's like I did almost all the exteriors in New York City on an 816. That's old school and everybody hates the 816. I
I
got
love it.
through it, no
Oh, I
problem.
love it. I love the more directional microphones. The rejection is just, but you got to be on your game. You got to be able to hit your mark every single time. You're not going to do that if you're exhausted, especially after like the
Exactly.
first minute. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that was your first one. Let me give you my first one. I think listening is key if you're going to be a boom operator, because a lot of the
Yes.
times people will, if they're wearing headphones, I mean, sometimes people still don't wear headphones for some reason this day and age. I'm critical. I think that listening is absolutely key. You got to know what you're pointing the mic at, and that way you could dial it in, because it's not as simple as putting the microphone in the general area as somebody, because if that was the case, why not use an omnidirectional microphone and just pull it all in? There's a
Right.
craft and a skill to it, and you got to know not just to put the microphone over someone, but you got to know how to angle it and position it where you need it to be when you need it to be there.
I couldn't agree more, and I hammer this in throughout my classes is we always circle back to this one thing, listening. Just like you say, listening. And you have to really experiment with microphones. You have to take criticism from the sound mixer when you're up and coming and you don't quite know the difference between being dead on and being slightly off. The mixer will tell you if they're hard ass and they're critical listeners, they'll tell you and they'll
Oh, they
correct you.
do. They do.
And so this is so key. And part of that comes, there's two add-ons to that: having good headphones and listening with enough level. Not ear splitting,
Right.
but you got to turn your level up, because if it's down too low, like sometimes, this is what happens. I start, we're on a busy set. Everyone's working. It's a noisy set. I turn my level down, in between, and then I go to do, like, let's say the rehearsal, or maybe we shoot. Um, and I'm
You mean
realizing,
shoot the rehearsal? That never happens.
yeah, or maybe we're doing coverage or something. We've
Right.
already shot and we're doing coverage. And I go pick up my mic, go to boom the shot, and I realize I'm like I'm like 3 clicks down on my headphones and it's low, and I'm like, oh, I can't tell what I'm doing. So it's not worth it. You gotta find this level that's hot enough that gives you all the information you need to know when you're on or off, or off a little, and know what your mic's doing with the background, know what your mic's doing with the actions of the actors, how to minimize that, how to blend between cues. You need enough level to do that. And once you find that level, you set that as your 12 o'clock on your IFB or whatever. Keep That's your 12. That's your baseline. And then now you're able to listen correctly. Now you can make little, you will almost never have to adjust. If you can always just look down, turn to 12, you're good to go.
And
But
the
you got to
ideal level
set that level.
changes according to you and how you're listening. On an IEM, it's going to be a totally different level than you're going to set if you're wearing over your headphones. And if you as a person may want to listen to something hotter or maybe a little softer than me. It just
Right.
it dial you got to find your level that works for you. And one of the things that's
Work,
also very
work the
interesting that
mix.
I'm sorry?
You work the mixer. You set the level with the mixer, so that this is what I do with every single mixer I work with. On day one, he's setting a new level for me. So I'm like, give me more level until my 12 o'clock is exactly where I need it to be. By the end of the day, we've got my level for the show. So it's not, I don't deviate from 12. I I keep it so that I know I never want to think about it when I go to shoot. I would never want to think, if should I bring it up, should I bring it down? No. If I know I throw it to 12, it's there. It's locked in. It's so rare that I need to come down or come up. I can always tell when I'm not at 12. I come in, I'm like, that's too hot. Look down, it's too hot. Or if it's soft, I look down, it's below 12. So you got to set that level
You
with your
do.
mix,
And it's
and that
critical too, because the way you listen is so critical on a set. And people, so oftentimes, they're trying to listen to just the dialogue. They're trying to just listen to, and they completely ignore everything that you're supposed to be listening for. It's not so much what you're listening to in the forefront. You also got to untrain yourself to filter out the things that are not important to you. And those
right.
things a microphone sucks in. What's your second of the 10?
Okay, so my second one is what you should know is how to watch a marking rehearsal effectively. Now, I see this way too much. And this is how I know that people aren't watching marking rehearsals effectively. Let's say for some reason I missed the marking rehearsal. Every now and then it happens, you know. They don't call it. You know, I'm outside, I'm waiting, and nobody
Location
said anything.
change.
They go
Yeah.
in, or you know, whatever. So, but or they'll say like, well, one of you saw it. So like maybe the mixer saw it, maybe my third saw it, and I'll ask them, what did you see? Tell me what you saw. And they'll give me a rundown. It is so basic. It's kind of like this, and this. And I'm just like, okay, that doesn't really tell me very much. So here's how I watch marking rehearsals. I'm very active when I watch a marking rehearsal. I move around the room because I don't want to get stacked up in a row of heads. I don't want to look at actors and see like a stack, like them stacking up, because I can't judge the distance between them when they're stacked up on me. So I'm always looking for my pivot point in the room during the marking rehearsal.
Mm.
So even though I'm 6'5", I sneak around. I kind of like, excuse me, you know, just whatever. I make little adjustments in my position in the room during the marking rehearsal so that I can get a really clear visual of where everyone is in relation to each other, the distances between them. And the only way to do that is to look at them like as an isosceles triangle. Like you want to get in between everybody. You don't want to be on the end of a row of heads because you're not going to get much information that way. You're not going to see their mouths moving. You're missing a lot of information that way. So you don't just file into the room and look for the one spot that's available next to like the flower pot, and then you're stuck watching this terrible perspective of the marking rehearsal. No, get in there and I crawl around.
Yeah.
I know I'm tall. I don't want to block anybody. So I'll get on my knees and go from below maybe so I don't block. Let's say a wall is filled with people.
Hmm.
I go down low. I get in front of these people, but down low so I don't block their view so that I have the right view to watch this marking rehearsal. And then I got my game plan. I know what everything is going to, I have a sense of the camera. I have a sense of everything because usually my perspective is the camera master perspective. So that's where I'm like headed. You know, when I go in that room, it's an active process. It's not passive. And that's how I get my game plan for the scene.
See, that's interesting to me. I usually try to find some place that I can watch everything, and I just kind of I pick like a master angle, I guess you could say, make sure I'm not obscured. But I usually dial in on a lot of things. I'll watch when someone walks from one place to another, and I'll be thinking in my mind, have three mats on standby. I'll be looking at
Right.
something and saying, I see where they're sitting down. I'm gonna maybe put a plant right there, or I'll
Yeah.
see, and
Yeah.
and I go ahead and work all that out. But I usually prefer to stand in one position to watch that, obviously unobscured. So that's interesting that you move around the room. I'm gonna have to think about that
Around the
one.
because I don't want to be stuck in this not seeing their mouths, not heads lined up where I don't see a perspective. If you're in the wrong perspective, you can't tell the distance between the actors, and
Yeah.
sometimes you can't tell from certain perspectives if it's one or two booms.
Mm,
So because I know when I see actors whether it's going to be one or two booms. I can just tell,
I
but I
can too.
can't tell so well if they're all lined up in front of me. Then
Oh, I
it's
agree.
very difficult.
Well, let
So
me give you my second one. My second one is footwear, footwear, footwear. You're on your
mm,
feet all day long. So having
yes,
uncomfortable shoes that kill you and drag you down, making you think about your feet all day long is a no-no. You got to have comfy shoes that you can live in on your feet for 15 hours a day or even more. And if you don't, then you need to get those because that is critical. You can't have your feet driving your energy level on a set. If you're tired, if your feet feet start to get tired, and so you sit down, your energy drains, and you got to
Right.
stay on your feet in order to be effective as a boom op.
That's right. That's right. You do want to dial in your footwear. I've dialed that in out of necessity due to plantar fasciitis, which is a painful condition where standing on your feet feels like you're standing on pedals on the balls of your feet, like pebbles. So it's a horrible condition that happened because I got the bright idea while working on a house of wearing this like really flat, thin sole shoe, thinking my feet's going to work harder and my feet are going to be happier. But instead, because I was standing on hard floors all day long, it ended up accelerating this condition. So
Yeah,
mistake made, lesson learned. Now I'm wearing Hokas and insoles.
yeah, so critical. What's number
Yep.
3 on your list?
Let's see. Number 3 is you have to learn how to communicate with directors and DPs in order to get the boom over the actors' heads during close-ups. This is like a very important skill for quality sound. This is where a lot of younger boom operators just throw in the towel because they figure everyone's on a wire and they meet the slightest bit of resistance and they're like, yeah, they're wired, it's fine. But you know what? Close-ups on wires are not fine. That's mediocre. So something that you have to learn, and you're not always going to succeed, but you can at least try with a game plan is to is to be able to, I mean, we understand that we can't boom all the masters. That's pretty hard, but you want to make sure that you don't lose close-ups to wires because that's where the performance is.
Yeah,
And like I say, wires get the dialogue, but the booms get the
and
performance.
that's such a brilliant, brilliant saying. I love it. I've started to use it myself.
Good. I use this on actors. I use this on directors. I use this on anybody who I feel needs a little education about what we do, besides just being speed bumps on the path to their success. So I use that line a lot, and
And
this
one
is a negotiating skill that you have to learn is how to negotiate your boom in for those close-ups, making sure that you're letting everyone know that you're holding them to task on letting you get a mic in for close-ups.
And one thing I personally find that I find extremely annoying is when you say, now we're going to go in for coverage here and here and here, but then they do coverage here while they
Right.
do a wide shot at the same time. Coverage
Right.
to a camera person or a director is not coverage for a boom operator and
Yeah.
for the sound department. That's what one of those little pet peeves of mine that when they say, oh no, we're going to get that in coverage, but then they decide to do this really creative angle looking up from the floor with 3 feet of headroom. You're like, that we should not do that. And I find that to be a spot on point that is very critical to negotiate because you got to really drive home. And some directors get it. Some directors will instantly say that doesn't work when you point it out to them. Some
Yeah.
directors that will say, I don't care. I have to get through my day.
Yeah. It's the worst when they don't care. Um, you know what's another pet peeve is when you tell them this and they're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna let you once because one common negotiating tactic is when you're happy with your wide shot, can I drop in and just run and get a pass on the tighter camera
Mhm.
once you are happy with your master? And I pay attention and listen to the director and see if he indicates happiness with that master. Then I jump in and be
Oh
like,
yeah.
can we now? But you know what they do sometimes? They start driving in, getting new shots and everything, and I'm just like, whoa, 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 whoa,
Yes.
whoa, whoa, whoa!
Yes.
Nice try, guys. We never got a boom over this tight shot. Maybe find a tight shot for your A camera now, and that's fine. We'll throw a boom over that one. But you don't dog us like this. We want this tight, shot on the boom.
And
Give
one
us
of the
one.
things that annoys me also is when first AEDs say, well, can we just get it wild? That is a bad habit to get into
No.
because getting something wild may get a track, but why not just, if that's the case, if that's all we're there to do, why don't we just record all of our dialogue for the entire day in the first 15 minutes of the day and I'll go home if that's
Yeah.
all it is?
Yeah.
Because that's really not what we are there to do. We are there to capture the on-camera dialogue, and we're gonna and the show's gonna live in the close-ups anyway. You want a boom there, and you're gonna want it in post if you don't believe it when you're rolling the wides at the same time. Let me
Yes.
give you my third on the list. My third is that as people are trying to figure out their best way of handling the pole, boom poles and shock mounts vary according to the combinations that you use, and it's important to find one of those that works for you. If you work with, I know you're a K-Tech guy. Well, I'm an ambient guy, and each one of those poles has certain shock mounts that work better with them than others, to my experience. Because if I throw a McDonald M5, like which you swear by, if I throw that on an ambient pole, sometimes if I'm doing a fast cue, I'll throw it out of I'll throw the microphone a little bit out of the shock mount. So one of the things I'll usually do is I'll grab a Sonella or sometimes an Envision Lyre. But
Right.
and what I found is that it's important for every boom operator to find a shock mount and a boom pole that works for them. And every one of them is different, and you got to try them in order to find the one that works for you.
True. I find myself not gravitating towards the Invisity, like the Rycoat, like Lyre ones, because they're hard plastic. And as you turn those things more radical angles, they lose their ability as shock mounts. They're really only designed to function in one axis. When you start going off that axis, that up and down axis, the more you come off that vertical axis, the more you lose your shock mount, because they're in a single axis flex. Whereas the M5, it's like any axis. It flexes in all axes. So that's why I tend to gravitate towards that. Now, as the Sonella does as well. So it's also pretty genius this way as well. But it's much more expensive, and each one is for one mic.
Right.
So love the Sonellas. I think they're an amazing product, but they're very specialized per microphone. You have to buy one for one mic. And if you're in a little bit of a budget, you don't really have the money to spend on one shock mount for one mic, I think the M5 Pro is a good choice. I haven't had this problem. If I have a mic that, I mean, this doesn't really happen to me, but I think I've prepared for this before. If it seems like a mic might hit the edge of the M5 Pro, you can line a little foot foam
Yes.
around it, and that way, if it bumps that foot foam, you won't hear it.
Right.
If your mic gets a little heavy, what I do now though is I double up on the rubber bands on the heavy side,
Mhm.
and I get total balance
I know some
on.
guys use the broccoli rubber bands because they're thicker and heavier duty.
Yeah. Broccoli. I used to mess around. I used to build my own. I used to take rubber bands from Office Depot and tie knots in them,
Mhm.
and I would tune the size. I would tie the knot in different lengths in order to get just the right. Like, I still use them. I still use rubber bands from Office Depot
Mhm.
because
If it works, why not?
yeah, well, some mics are so sensitive. You can't use the stuff they came with. When I use the Sheps with the side address capsule,
Yes.
it's the most sensitive mic I've ever put on a stand. So I have to push the whole mic through the mount all the way to the end where the rubber band is touching the right angle of the cable, just to get just to get the bands away from the capsule side, because the farther away you get from the capsule side, the less handling noise gets transmitted to it.
Mm.
So I push it as far as I can and get it away, and then I get to a point where my handling noise is in check. But that was one challenging mic to figure out how to use. But now I use it.
Yeah, it's also, especially when you put it in a vehicle.
Oh,
It's wonderful, and it's a change. It's a game changer when you have that as an option in a
it's
vehicle.
I never imagined that there was a mic that kind of blew everything else out of the water in a car, and that's the one. But you gotta like really dial in your shock mount or you can't move.
Right.
They're
It is
hard,
extremely, yeah, and
you know.
it's an amazing technological innovation, and no one else to date, except I think B9, B5, something like that, is making the side address capsules. So
Yeah.
it's something that a lot of people don't even know about anymore.
No, they don't. And the only reason why I even know about it is Tom Varga picked up a couple. He's a mic nerd. He does a lot of post sound. He records bands. He's all into mics. So some guy had put a couple of side address capsules at Gotham Sound on consignment, and the sales guy was like, "I don't know anybody who wants these." And he was like,
Oh,
"Sure,
yes, they do. If they only
half
knew.
the price." So he bought them, and then he's like, he made me use it in the car, and I was dying. I was like, I couldn't move. So I had to really take after take after take. Between each take, I had to keep working on my setup and keep butzing with it and keep butzing with it until finally I could actually cue inside of a car with it. And it's very gentle cue because it's already got an incredible
Hmm.
wide pickup
That's
pattern.
a beautiful pattern.
I still hear a little bit more richness when I cue towards the person talking, even though
Oh, I do too.
you could get away with not. You could get away with not. But I always hear some improvement, so I always go for it. That's just how I am. So my fourth, you know, item that every boom operator should know or do is switch directions. Get comfortable with switching. It's so critical. It helps you in so many ways. Not only is it better for your body in distributing the forces that we have, the asymmetrical forces on your body. So physically, it'll help with the longevity. It helps with you. It also will help with you positioning yourself on set, next to camera, away from camera, next to a wall, next to a column, next to any kind of obstacle. You can always pick the direction that works best for your situation versus
Absolutely.
stuck always in the same position that is the most comfortable for you, and that's not necessarily going to be the best position. You might find yourself awkward, like if I'm with my back to camera, it feels weird. I
It
have to
does.
keep looking over my shoulder. It's a very awkward position. It's so much more comfortable to just face the camera always. And I know you get 3 camera shows and you're like, well, which camera do I face? You face the one that is the biggest problem for you, the one that
Very
you really
good.
got to keep an eye on.
I was waiting for you to
So,
say that one. That is
yeah,
critical. Because
yeah,
a lot of you don't need to watch the close up. I mean,
yeah,
unless the wide shot's getting something totally different and you're dialing in on this one person.
right.
But you nailed it right there. The one that is going to be the one that gives you the biggest issue. Like if there's
Yeah.
a wide and there's a medium, obviously play for the wide and face that
Obviously,
camera.
that's the one you're going to face. Anybody with like tighter shots than the wide, you don't really got to worry about those.
Yeah.
You got to worry about the one that's the frame line is going to be, that you're worried about. That's the camera to face. So that's if you can switch, you'll always be able to face it, and you'll be able to do walk and talks better. There's so many things that you'll do better, and your body will thank you because half the problems that I see with shoulder issues is from people who have a lot of old school guys who never who and just like stubbornly always boom from one direction. And I've seen these guys who are old, good boom operators, but physically they put themselves in a tough spot
Yes.
because they've got years of facing one direction. And those asymmetrical loads never get switched up, and that leads to like all kinds of shoulder, neck, back problems.
Well, if you have
Right.
one arm that's constantly pushing up and one arm that's constantly pushing down, there's a
Yes.
lot of issues there. I mean,
A lot
and
of
and
issues.
and and you got to switch it up, if nothing else, just for stretching's sake, and to give your body a rest and to mix it up. And plus, I'm going to add one
Yeah.
more thing. Sometimes
Yeah.
we do get thrown into a corner. Sometimes there's a circumstance where we got to be in a weird situation, and in that circumstance, we may have to boom up and over something like the
Yeah.
edge of a table. And if it's up against our back, we could have the pole in a light, and we have to switch sides in order to get around something that we need to. and
That's
maybe
right.
and maybe that's because in a particular place of a dolly move, you have to jump over a light or something, so you may
Mhm.
go from here over your head for a short period of time. So it's very
Right.
critical to be able to switch sides. I totally agree.
Yeah. And sometimes it helps. Let's say, on some TV shows, you get into a tighter shot where it doesn't really matter so much which side you're booming from. It's going to be like a medium single or something, or medium shot, medium two shot, and it's not critical, but you're going super long takes without
Yes.
cuts. You know what? On the reset, switch sides. You don't need to see the camera anymore. You already got it. On the reset, switch sides, and now you're distributing 30 minutes of booming. You're splitting it in half on your body.
I
So
actually have I actually have
it
two techniques that while the pole is still out, I have two techniques I can use to switch hands on the fly. And
right.
and
You,
that's
you
and
know,
that's something that you need to figure out how to do also without making
on
the
a
bolt.
reset.
Yeah,
Yeah, on a
exactly.
reset, have time on a reset. All you do is just switch sides on a reset. And if you're not moving a lot, I mean, obviously, if you're doing a very complicated scene, with a lot of queuing around and all this stuff, sure, you're gonna pick a side and stick to it because you develop what do you call it? Memory, muscle
Muscle
memory,
memory. Yeah.
and you don't want to mess with that too much unless you feel really cocky. Sometimes I do, but if you're in a boring sort of like two shot or single and it's just endless, go ahead and switch sides on the reset. Save your body will thank you. You'll feel less tight. Your palms will start to get numb on these super long
They
takes,
do. They do.
and
It's
then this
so
will help.
weird.
I'm looking for gloves that can like take the edge off that sometimes, because cycling gloves are kind of don't work right. They've got a void
A
right
pressure.
across the part where your boom goes. So it like your boom sits right in between the padding.
Yeah, there's actually some mechanics gloves that you can buy on places like Amazon that are extremely thin, give you a lot of feeling to them. That they
Yeah,
they don't restrict your movement a whole lot. That
right.
still, I mean, I really like them personally.
Yeah,
Might want to check them
absolutely.
out on Amazon or something, and because mechanics make some really good stuff. Um,
Oh, mechanics. Okay, yes, with the X,
Yes,
right?
with the X, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of different ones. I think the ones I'm using right now are like 0.5 millimeter. They're very, very thin. They're spot on exactly what I like. They're a little bit more reinforced right here for when you wrap cable, which I really like too, but that's it. It's just right there. And it doesn't
Hmm.
even go all the way up. It's just right where you would want it to be for controlling a cable.
Cool.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I'll look into that.
one other thing,
Oh,
the next thing I have on my list that I think is really
yeah.
critical, and it took me a while to figure out, is that feet tell a story. Sometimes we're in a hallway, and because of a dolly move or something, we can't be on a ladder. And we are looking directly through an electrician holding up a light, and we're looking through two cameras and dolly grips, and we have to be up, we have to be up and over it all and far enough back, and all we're able to see is obscured actors and maybe their waist down. My
Right.
my next one is feet tell a story. What you can tell a lot from an actor from their feet. If you have
Hmm.
2 feet in an alignment like this, you know which way their face is most likely pointed, as long as you know where the other actor is that they're speaking to. If someone
Right.
turns a foot to the side, you know where they're probably going to be directing their face depending on how their feet are. You know how your own feet work, and if your vision is obscured from someone's face and you can't tell which way they're looking, try to take a sneak peek at their feet, because chances
I
are it's going to
like
tell
this.
you which way their face is looking, and you can dial in the rest of it with your ears and your microphone. As a matter of fact, this is actually a technique that I learned from a police officer. A lot of the times that when this particular police officer was trained, that if he is doing a DUI test, don't even bother having above the waist on the person that they're testing. Concentrate the camera on the waist below, because that will tell you everything you need to know about them. And I was like,
Uh,
wow, that's really neat.
okay.
I wonder if I could take that to work with me. And it surprisingly works effectively for us when you can't see someone's face.
I've never like thought of that, but I have found myself in those situations. Obviously, we all do, where we're obscured. We're trying to boom a scene and we can't see our actor.
Yeah.
And great little tip. I'm gonna actually try that.
And
I'm
I
gonna.
think you'll dial in real quickly on it, because you not only will see the feet and you know how feet point, but you're also
Mm,
going to be able to listen, and you're going to say, I
right.
think I'm on the edge of my pattern, and you'll adjust the way that makes sense, and you'll say, there
Right.
they are. They pop into the pattern again.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
amazing.
Cool. I like that tip. That's a good one. Yeah, I've never heard that. That's really good.
It's something that came to me accidentally, and I was like, wow, that's something that I wish I would have known earlier, because it really comes in handy.
Exactly. For those situations. I like it. So, you want me to go into my fifth one?
Oh
My
yeah. What you going to bring us home with?
okay. So, just uh, and these are all very handy tips.
Oh, they are.
The my fifth one is um to find the spot on the set that covers the most action with the least amount of walking. So
Mm.
I tend to call this, and because I like creating terms that are easy to register with people, so I call this the pivot point.
Hmm.
So, and
Makes
you're
sense.
good at this. I already know you're good at this because I found a video of you with the perfect pivot point, and you had to because you were on like this crazy long boom on a stand. So
Oh,
I'm going to use that video as a very like
that was the
visual
jumbo pole, the 36 footer that I was next to the super techno
36
crane
footer
on.
with a sandbag at the end
Yeah.
on like a combo stand.
Yes.
So that is a good example of finding the spot where you could move the base as minimally as possible, yet cover all the action. Um, so this kind of like that's an extreme example, but extreme examples are very good illustrations.
Yes.
But that's what I do all the time. I always look for the spot on set where I can be, where I can cover as much of the action as possible, movement, actors, walking in, out, whatever, as much as possible without having to walk. Now, of course, sometimes you got to walk, but if you're always looking for the spot with the most coverage where you can get your body English in, sweep across the room with the pole, do as much sweeping as possible and as little rowing and walking as possible, you're going to find yourself being able to be more effective, get surprised less, do moves that surprise people in like your coverage ability, and it's just going to sound better, and you're going to work less. You're the whole goal is you're going to work less, you're going to have less accidents, less tripping on things. This is the mistake that I see a lot of my utilities get into when they come on the set and boom, and why I find myself really locking down their position so that they don't have to walk, so they can cover as much as possible without walking, without moving,
Oh, I
and
do.
and so I mean, you kind of naturally do this, I know, and it's something that I was doing unknowingly, and it's not until I started teaching that I realized I was doing this because I did it subconsciously,
Hmm.
and I realized this is what I'm doing. I'm lazy. I want to find the easiest spot on the set to do the most damage. So it's like that's what I do. Where's everybody moving? How can I put myself in the middle of that action and then just swing my pole around? When I can do that, I feel like I've got it. Like I feel very comfortable with the situation if I'm in the middle of it and I'm just sweeping across everything. I mean, I can cover 6 people just by sweeping, you
And
know?
sometimes it's down the barrel. I mean, you feel like it's
Yeah,
down the barrel because two
right.
cameras are looking like this, cross-covering
Yeah,
actors maybe,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they might have a light in the middle, and you may be saying, "Well, maybe I have to be way over the side and do a whole bunch of weird leaning in
No,
and out." You don't. Sometimes being on the opposite side right there is the ideal spot because the cameras are looking to your left and to your right, and you could just simply do this number right there in the middle of them, and they'll never see you. But
yeah,
definitely talk to the operators and make sure they're not going to do something like pan someone out or something like that.
right. Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to communicate with the operators and everybody, but I find that I gain the trust of the operators very quickly
Absolutely.
and feel very comfortable with me. I've heard them the last show. He said, Ken, I didn't like, I was booming a shot in a hallway. In the actor, he, it was just him in the doorway, and I was behind the camera at first, trying to dodge shadows. But as we tightened up, I realized, gosh, we're so tight now. Why don't I just stand next to camera, back against the wall, hug the wall? The camera's frame is grazing in front of my chest, but now I'm 4 feet in front of the actor
Mm-hmm.
instead of 12 feet, and now my accuracy improves and I'm working way less,
Yeah,
much easier. So and I got in there and I knew that it was such a tight shot that my body would fit to the right of frame against the wall next to camera. And he said, Ken, do whatever you want, I trust you.
exactly.
He
Exactly.
said
And
that to me.
that takes a lot to get out of a camera operator. But there are many times that there'll be a walk and talk with a Steadicam shot, and I'll be between the Steadicam and the actor. And then
Yeah,
you're like, how, are you really going to be there? Yes, I am. You're not going to feel me. Don't worry about it. And
yeah,
after a
exactly.
while, they'll be like, you know what? I'm not worried about it. Exactly like you said. Let me,
Yeah, that's want to reach this point with your operators where they're not worried about you. They want to they don't want to worry about you. If they're worried about you, your job gets harder
Yes,
because they talk you out, they keep you away. It's and here's the thing, from show to show, operators are different. So I find younger operators are a little trickier to work with. They're not as sure of themselves in their framing. So they tend to
they're
be
not as
more.
consistent either.
Say what?
And they're not as consistent. And that
Yes.
goes right in line with what you're saying. They're going to
Yeah.
not hit the same marks every single time.
So they get nervous about you because they don't even have this confidence in themselves and the steadiness. We talk about steadiness for us. Same goes for operators. Good operators are very smooth and steady.
Yeah.
Other operators, their frame lines are all over the place. They from take to take, you're just like, wait a minute, you're like a foot higher than you were on the last take.
And then they'll
And
say nothing changed when you ask
yeah,
them.
like,
Because
oh,
it'll take five. We saw the boom in the shot.
yeah,
It's 9 inches over on the head. Here's one for you to think about. About 7 years ago, I was on a show and I was somehow in the tights, but not in the wide, in the mediums, in the wides. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? And the
yeah,
operators were like, the operator who was the tight camera was like, you just need to hold the boom higher. I'm like, why am I in the tight and I'm not in the wide? Well, guess who was fired after 3 episodes?
right.
Yeah,
Backed up.
that operator, and they got a much better one. Let me give you my last list, and this is one that I think is something that kind of makes sense. Small adjustments should be made with your hands. Bigger movements and adjustments need to be made with your legs. Your legs support you and everything about you, but they're not nearly as fast as the hands. So if you have to do a quick, head turn, or you have to, someone quickly, does a forward movement and then back. Sometimes if they're ad-libbing and someone decides to suddenly run some particular direction, you have to lead with the hands until your feet can catch up. But I
Right,
find that if you boom so that way your hands follow the small movements, just stay loose on your feet and move your feet when you have a bigger move to do, and try on a walk and talk to use your hands for more cushion and let your legs do the moving. And I find
right.
this to be so critical right there for just the craft of holding a boom pole.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. Like that, save the legs for the big movements and use your hands and arms for the smaller movements. However, I will say, if you try to cradle the boom across your body at shoulder level, you have a tremendous amount of reach
You
that you
do.
can use in emergency situations. And let's say sometimes your feet are jammed up. You got lights, dollies, all this stuff, and you really don't have a lot of room to walk. It happens. Sets are getting very tight and crowded. It's nice if you can get shoulder level, that you can cover a huge swath of movement, because at shoulder level, you have about 30% more reach than over your head. You just do. If your feet are locked to the ground, if somebody stapled your feet to the ground and you pull your arms overhead and you move as radically far forward and back as you could with your arms overhead, you're about 30% less movement than if you pull the boom at shoulder height, bracing it against your body. But let's say you have to move it and unbrace, you've got 30% more distance. You'll see it in my video on
Oh,
the
couldn't agree
masterclass.
more. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm,
So yes, I
and
agree.
that's
The
just and that's
small
simple.
movements,
And if you
hands.
and if you think about it, that's simple. Like, what is it,
Yeah,
trigonometry or something like
yeah,
that,
exactly.
where if you have your hands up like this, you can only do this so much, but if you have your hands more laterally, you can travel that entire distance. It makes total sense.
Right.
Now, you mentioned your class here. We've gotten through all 10, and every single one of these is critical and something that a boom operator really needs to know. But you just touched on something. I want to use it to segue right into it. You are an educator. You teach a whole lot, even internationally, and you have your own courses that you put together. And how can people find those if they'd like to look up some of your personal education opportunities?
Right. So what I've done is, in my very first class I taught in Los Angeles, I had the intention of packaging that class to sell. So I had my brother light it. He shot it, and I knew I'm going to sell this class. So I that was my focus. The notes from that class have become actually a book, but then I generated some notes for that class. So you can find the whole class on Video Mantis. So I partnered with Thomas Pop to offer that class until actually continuously. You'll always be able to find that class on Video Mantis. It covers so much.
It does. It
You've
absolutely
seen
does.
it. You're my first customer, and you bought it. So this is
Yeah.
not like some.
And audience, he offered it to me for free as a fellow educator, and I said, no, 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 no. I know what it's worth, and I know you're going to be selling it at a steal of a deal, and I jumped on it and did buy it, and I think it's worth far more than he's offering it for, personally.
Thank you. I mean, it's like I've got 27 years of doing this, and I'm giving it to you, all the shortcuts and all the little tricks I figured out. It's all in there. It's the price of a coiled cable at Location Sound, and you've got all the ways you can jump ahead and level up, and then reach a baseline where you can really fine tune and become like a killer boom operator. If you ingrain some of this in your head,
And
everything, you know.
it is so critical. It's amazing to me how you streamline years of information into a few hours. It really is. And that's one of the things that I watched it multiple times. Each segment I've watched at least once. I think the minimum amount of time I've watched one segment was twice, and the most I've watched a segment was 8 times. And I've owned the course for just over a month at the time of this video. And I'll tell
Right.
you, there's a lot of stuff that even veterans will pick up on. So just because you've been doing this for a decade or two, don't think there's nothing you're going to learn out of it. You're going to take some stuff home. So if you're interested in getting his course on Video Mantis or any of his future any future things that he's interested in releasing, I know he's working on a book as well. I'm going to keep constant information that's current in the description down below, so check that out. Ken, thank you so much for joining us and participating in this top 10 list of things that boom operators need to know.
My pleasure.
Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.